Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here with another Product Growth Leaders topic of the week. Steve, we are on calls, coaching and training, instruction calls, every day. And it seems like, gosh, product management's hard, isn't it?
Yes and no. What you and I consider to be product management isn't very difficult. What's difficult is finding time to actually do product management because you're so busy participating in the dysfunction of all the other departments.
And I think maybe that, we go through these cohort sessions and we're talking and people are like, we can't do this consistently. We have a hard time with this. But the point, maybe I asked the wrong question this week and we can ask it next week, but a lot of it is that clarity of roles or lack of clarity of roles.
Absolutely.
When it comes to that. And actually, I digress on going down the path. We had a conversation yesterday with some people and where I almost suggested maybe investing in product designers would be a better use of money than investing in product owners. But maybe that's a point for a different conversation. But we wanted to tackle this idea of the hardest product management activities. And on Monday, I put in the community the question: what is the hardest product management activity to get delivered consistently across the organization? Now, this is a more specific question, thinking about consistently delivering it, not what's the hardest thing to do, but what's the hardest thing to do consistently. Jason Vincelette, although he's not on the call, he did return to my heart by being the first answer on a Monday, where he is supposed to always be. He said a fixed long-term product roadmap, and Vineet Singla agreed with that. Jason Weber said, your message, it seems like you can never repeat yourself enough, and even if you do, people will not get it right. Then Paul Hatala, who's been in many of these calls, I feel like I'm stuck between the two Jasons. Their president delivered a long-term roadmap, but then said, we're not sure whether we can execute on it. So how is that for messaging? But May, you came in and I think really changed the tenor this week, getting people away from maybe task-based activities to sort of stakeholder and even the soft skills. You said getting the whole org to trust product management to make the right decisions. Talk to me about where your head is.
Well, I was reading through what people are saying, right? Like, I was thinking about like building a long-term roadmap. Yeah, that's hard, but fixing it, but you don't want to do that anyways. Or like, your messaging, but it's not about the things you deliver, right? It's about how they're received and whether or not they're effective. What's your actual impact of the things that you ship? So, can you tell this is what we're talking about at work constantly? What is the most important thing you can possibly do? And like you put in all that effort to do that product management work. And then you're like, this is the most important thing we could do. Like, and this is the vision, and this is the why, and this is like the inspiration to do all of that stuff. And then nothing, because they don't trust you. Right? So if you don't have that trust, if you don't have that relationship, it doesn't matter how much work you actually put in, it all ends up being fruitless, because that trust is like the basis of everything else that you do.
You just, as always, you always make me think, May, and I remember listening to a podcast. I think it was Freakonomics, but it could have been somebody else like, like that. And they had this guy who could predict if couples were going to get divorced at like a 90% rate. And what it all came down to was the level of contempt they showed for their partner. And I use this as almost a parallel to the trust thing, right? Because if people don't trust their stakeholders, the other stakeholders across the organization, if they don't trust product management, often they hold them in contempt, right? Or we hold product design or development or sales, and Steve holds sales in contempt.
No, actually, I don't. I have a reputation for that, I know, but I want salespeople to focus their energies on selling products that we have to people who need it, instead of dabbling in product management and marketing and development.
Yeah.
And as I have said many times, there's really no reason for development and sales to ever be in the same room together unless sales is thanking them for good work.
Yeah, I could see that. So, but trust, I think, is an incredibly valuable thing. And in obviously, when we get to the poll, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Cory came with enjoying and agreeing with all his answers. For you, it's consistent focus, adjoining shiny objects. And to me, this set up a whole nice dichotomy of, you know, which comes first, trust or focus.
Yeah, so this was 2 days ago, and when we
You've
get to the
changed your mind
poll,
already?
I changed my mind already. But I do think because trust is one of those fundamental things, like, you know, humans need air to breathe. Okay, agree. Fundamental. Let's have that first. Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? The base level of that is trust. If I don't trust you to do something, it doesn't matter about all this other stuff. So yeah, when you're presented with one of those confusing options of, do you disagree with the fundamental truth or not? It's like, I kind of got to go with the trust thing. Past that, I would say keeping a consistent focus. And I think the key word there is consistent, which is from day to day, week to week. This is our strategy. This is what we're doing until we get evidence that this is not working. This is the direction we're going. So please stop all this other activity because it doesn't help us with our focused things. And actually, the word of the week that I'm learning more and more that I like is the frame that we're working in. And how does that fit? Because not only do we not want to be focus, I think, is too narrow. It's the frame that we're playing in, and how do we actually go towards that framing?
So the framing of the options of where we could be, and we
Framing of the
focus within
strategy.
that.
Yeah, we're
So
playing in this field. It's not just this one thing, it's this thing, but there's the other things outside of that frame. Still, you've got that same problem of, are we working on this or the world? And we're working on this. It's just a little bit bigger than a spotlight.
The two metaphors I've used is either the playing field, right? How do you define the boundaries?
Yeah.
Right. Or the guide rails, right?
Yep.
Right. What, and so I completely and totally agree with that. And when we get to the poll, I guess I'm going to have to make the defense of focus, since you've given it up. Steve, is somebody other than you allowed to quote Patrick Lencioni?
Sure. I guess that would be okay.
I didn't read the bylaws. I'm sorry. I screw up.
I wanted to, you know, no, I think Steve has become to Lencioni what I am to Drucker, where on whether it's our teaching calls or coaching calls or these calls, he seems like he brings Patrick up a lot. So for good reason. He writes great stuff and has great insight.
The difference is, I think you are generally very accurate in your quoting of Drucker, and I generally paraphrase.
I spent my time documenting and pulling out everything because I'm just a nerd that way.
Gotcha.
Calvin, you sort of you started with trust. May got you on trust, and then the second thought was getting around a consensus, and adding a different dimension into, right? We need focus, we need trust, but is building consensus harder than building trust? Or do you need trust to build consensus? And do you need focus and trust to build consensus?
I think you do need focus. Trust, I don't know. But I think, in reading what Cory said and thinking about that, I mean, I felt like I was taking that slightly, I hesitate to say forward, but in a kind of in that same vein, in that to have focus, to have consensus. I mean, I think they're kind of on the same coin, or on opposite sides of a similar coin, in that if you're not focused, if you don't have consensus, you typically don't have focus because you're not able to drive forward. And what I see a lot of times,
you need consensus to have focus, or you need focus to have consensus? You can say yes.
I say chicken or egg.
May, do you have a take on it?
I don't know if you could have a true consensus without focus, because what is your consensus on, right? Is it a decision to do something? If it's a decision to do something, what is the value of your decision if you're not focusing on that thing afterwards? Or the frame afterwards. So don't you need both? in a way, or like
I
you
think
can have one
I
without
think
the other.
I
But
think you can. I would even build all three. It's hard to have consensus. You don't have trust, right? If it's that base layer of it. This is totally off of this idea of hardest thing. We're now getting into defining some
Yeah.
of the soft skill type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think where I was going with that though is that what I've seen is, you know, the product manager and product management, that organization driving toward, you know, driving a project, driving the roadmap, and you know, at upper levels, a lot of times things just get untracked. It's like, well, I don't believe, you know, salesperson will say, well, I don't believe that, or finance will say, well, yeah, that doesn't work, or whatever, you know, whatever the case may be. And getting that consensus, you know, is important to driving efforts forward.
Karen Bell-DeWitt just put in the chat, and I'm going to go to you, Karen. You said coming off of postmortem where consensus wasn't clear. And I think this is part of the problems with consensus is that, and Clay, I'm going to pull you in after this one with your common language. Sometimes we think we have consensus. You know, Steve has a slide I think about when we're talking about roadmaps, where do we all mean the same thing when we say first quarter, right? Well, for the sales guy, it's the first of the quarter. For the development person, it's the last of the quarter. How do we have consensus in that type of stuff?
No, actually, it's the sales guy wants it the middle of the prior quarter.
And the marketing person wants it the first of the quarter.
Right.
So talk to me about your experience with that, Karen.
Oh, I'm not good at talking right now. The a bunch of different groups were working on a really massive project, and they all thought they were driving toward the same goal, but they hadn't asked the right questions of each other. They hadn't really pressed each other for understanding, you know, shared understanding across the group.
Yep.
And so it's a communication issue. And they all thought they were going in the same direction. And for the most part they were, but is that like they didn't quite meet in the middle.
Yeah.
So.
Which then gets to, is the hardest thing common understanding, right? But this now adds to trust and focus and consensus as maybe all these things that come together. But, you know, I love this idea of shared understanding, and it is very hard to get to because too often we're each, as you said in the chat, working from our own lenses. Clay, I'm going to bring you in. You actually gave us two answers. I don't know if you changed your mind once you started thinking about trust, but the first one you gave was terminology, vocabulary. And it seems like that almost plays into the shared understanding. We can often think we're talking about the same thing, but we use the same word to mean different things. Is that sort of where you started?
Yeah, well, my first answer was what was top of mind, because it's been I'm a new product manager in a fast-growing organization that is, and there's a lot of miscommunication, and everything is verbal. You don't write anything down. And I'm like, oh my God, how do you know? And then there's lots of reasons for that. But so that was top of mind. But then I saw May's answer, and I'm like, oh yeah, trust. But the flip side of that, because she's right. But what I'm experiencing is I want the team. So I came in on a project that had made no progress in like 8 months, and everybody was like, "Oh, we're almost done." And I'm like, "With what? Like nothing. There's not enough working for me to test to tell you what's working. Like I can't even log in." And I'm like, are they setting me up to be the fall guy for this? Like, what's going on? Because they're like, oh yeah, you're going to be done in like a month, right? Yeah, the CEO's calling me going, yeah, so like next, like October, right? And I'm like, that's 2 weeks away. And so I go to my boss and I'm like, there's not. And so luckily he's like, oh yeah, I guess you're kind of right. So anyway, so I came in, the team wasn't, there was a lot of dysfunction. So what I needed was for the team to trust me enough to tell me what was going on so that I could, and then also trust me enough to ask for help, because it's not enough for them to say, oh, we're not doing this well, which is hard. That's the first step. It's like therapy, right? First, you have to admit that you've got a problem, because then you can talk about it. And then maybe you can start solving it. So I needed them to trust me enough. And a friend of mine said, you got to be Columbo. You got to go in, with a frumpled old jacket going, oh, one more thing, this is really curious. And so I did. I went in and I just kind of played dumb and I didn't give them any feedback for a while. And and I'm like, okay, first thing is all work needs to go into a ticket. They were tracking work in chat and conversations. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, I had to try to have a neutral, I almost choked. So trust is two-way. Trust that you're going to trust me, but trust me enough to tell me what's going on, because I got a lot of experience. I might be able to help, but you got to be willing to tell me that there's a problem.
Trust and transparency is not just in trusting my decisions and me giving you transparency of the process, but it's you trust me enough to be transparent, to help me see things the bodies that I don't know where they're buried in the skeletons in the closet.
Well, trust me enough that I'm not gonna pounce on, because think about it. You tell me, oh gosh, I'm really bad at this one thing. Oh my God, you run the risk that even if I'm not evil, right? Even if I'm just well-meaning but bumbling, that then I go, Grant, you're right, Grant, you aren't good at this. And then next month I go, by the way, Grant, I've been noticing that you're really bad at this thing. What's the progress on that? And then in 6 months, I'm like, God, Grant is not making fast enough progress on this thing because you're shining a big spotlight, right? Yeah. So you got to trust me enough, and it'd be understandable if you didn't trust me. So
no, I love that.
Karen posted something good in the chat, and since she's having difficulty with her coughing, I thought I would read it. She says, this is one of the key learnings that came out of a recent postmortem. People need to ask for help, but in order to do that, they need to build trust.
Yeah.
So it is that two-way. Trust is a two-way. I love that view of it, Clay. Thank you for sharing that. Eva, this is a question that honestly, I thought about after a post you had put, because we're going to do that one in a future week. But you're new to product management. You've come in. I'd love to get your take from where you are at a fast-growing organization in your new role. What do you think is the hardest thing to get delivered? Hardest activity to get delivered consistently from what you're seeing?
I think I'd use the analogy of like a monkey with a shiny object. It's like as soon as there's like this great new feature, it's so hard to get collaboration on what you're working on. If there's like a bigger item, a different PM on your team is working on with engineering. So just getting their time. And to Clay's point, like getting out of Slack, having real meetings. Like I'm sick of like just having a thread of 2,500 responses in Slack about my epic. It's like, can we just get on a frickin' phone call, guys? But yeah, I think obviously I've only been a product manager for maybe a year now, and I'm 4 months into my new company, and there is going to be trust issues there. I mean, they're going to realize that this woman doesn't know what the hell she's doing because she hasn't been doing product for a decade. She's been doing support for 20 years and then into product. So I just am very transparent with people. I am very open. I am very Philadelphian, as I like.
I was about to say that's the transparency is a Philadelphia thing, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. But I think I'm respectful, right? I'm not sitting there cursing people out 24/7, even though as soon as we sign out for this call, I'm like a freaking Goodfellas movie. I am still going to be respectful of everybody, but I'm going to be transparent on what I know and what I don't know. I'm not going to sit there and pretend I'm like an API expert if I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So it is what it is.
I love that. Different perspective than some people. I haven't been in that role for 20 years, so it helps me see and understand sort of where it comes from. Pamela, you've been normally you've jumped in and gave us so much wisdom. You've been sitting by and listening. I
guess I've been trying to synthesize it because I agree, like trust is a huge thing. And I think maybe what Eva is going to find over time is as people hear what she has to say and she provides the guidance, they're going to trust her more, right? So actually, I've been looking up, there used to be like the 4 attributes of a leader, and I can't find the exact words, but one important one was hope. And the other one was trust, right? Like so I think we can't get away from delivering consistency consistently good product management without recognizing that we have to take on this mantle of leadership. And that if we have people who view us as leaders, our life gets so much easier, right? And what we find when we first come in, like Eva, is everybody's like, I don't know what the heck she's talking about, right? Does she really know what she's doing? And over time, we get that mantle. And I think there's also something to be said in all of this for hanging around at the same company for a long time, right? Like the longer you're around, the more people kind of go, well, it worked last time she said it, so we should listen to her again, right? So trust is something that kind of amplifies over time.
No, I love the idea. And I think that I had put a post at some point somewhere in some place saying, you know, really, it was talking about if we could rename product management because of the problems we have with it, what would it be? And I actually talked about product. I think product leader should be the role, right? Because we are a leader. We're really not managing the other people. We're a leader who's bringing them together and coordinating them and helping people work toward, and it's hopefully inspiring them, right? In the old Warren Bennis, management is doing things right and leadership is doing the right things. You know, how do we do that and with leadership? But your hope took me to, I'm like, isn't there a song with hope, courage, and wisdom? But it's actually strength, India RE, strength, courage, and wisdom. But I think that sort of it fits. You know, Steve giving me a look because I quoted India RE. Is that what it was?
No, I was thinking you were quoting The Wizard of Oz. You know,
we got to
one
give
of
it a
them
more
wanted courage. The Scarecrow wanted a heart or whatever.
Yeah.
A brain.
If we choose a new name, it has to be a really humble name so that nobody wants to do it just for the title. So like product servant would be great, right?
Well,
good call.
Servant leader, right? I actually don't, but
yeah, I did a thing a while back. This group, the product managers had been pulled into, you know, just one too many sales calls. And we created a new role and they called it something super attractive. And I went, hang on, honey, let's change the title. Let's make it Director of Product Strategy and Future Deliverables or something. It was god awful, you know, and nobody wanted that title and the salespeople didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I said, you know, success, this is exactly what we wanted. Because the product manager title is very attractive to salespeople because they're like, oh, look, I brought you the product manager to be my, you know, servant.
Well, I feel like today everybody everything that should be done, everybody's roles are so prescribed that they're missing, like if somebody didn't tell somebody to do an important task and it didn't get assigned, there's nobody with spare time to do it. So along comes a product manager and we have flexibility. Like my boss is like, do whatever you want. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, go find where you're needed. And so you'll find that that's why you get sucked into so many things. There's so much stuff where if only somebody, you know, did this last little part. You know, I sold medical software for a while, and a volunteer organization told me about how they did that. They would fill in the gaps. And they said, yeah, they went to a VA hospital and somebody donated all these artificial limbs, but the instructions were on a CD, and they didn't have a CD player and they couldn't get one authorized. So he came in and provided them with a $50 CD player that enabled like $150,000 worth of artificial limbs, but it wouldn't have happened through normal chains.
What is enabler a better product enabler?
Ooh, that's good.
You know, problem. No, I don't know. I like using the word enabler because I believe product management does enable the organization, right? Facilitator. Yeah. You know, empathizer, Eva put in there. We've got product ops in the house as well. Karen, you want to?
Yeah, this kind of reminds me. I'm just wrapping up a really big project around roadmaps, and I literally interviewed 30 of our senior leaders and compiled what they were saying. And it's really interesting. Product management's own definition of what they do is all over the map.
Mhm.
I had one senior level product manager say, my job is to serve engineering. And I was like,
That's increasingly common.
well,
Very dangerous.
coming from a
Yes.
P&L world where I thought my job was to serve the P&L and the customer, that was the thing.
Yeah, I'm equally shocked. I mean, don't get me wrong, but that's what Grant and I have seen over, in particular, the last decade, is more and more people honestly think that the scope of their role is merely writing JIRA tickets for development.
That's
Does
dangerous.
that mean you think that would it be fair to say that is a result of Agile?
Yeah.
Yes, it would be fair to say.
Methodology?
What? No, yes, and I think that it is a result of technology-led, more technology-led organizations where product management is looked at as a resource for development, not a resource for the business, right? And this is where Steve and I talk about the business role of product management versus the technical role of product management. We see value in that technical role of product management, whether it's a technical product manager or a product planning manager or a BA or a product owner, whatever you call it, right? But there's the triad, and somebody has to. And Alex Osterwalder, and I was joking about this in our strategy class this week. Somehow you can bookmark a tweet, and I don't know how I did it, but I only have one, and every once in a while I hit the button, it comes up. It's Alex Osterwalder, and he says innovation and entrepreneurship is not about good ideas. And I think you could say the same. Product management is not about good ideas. It's about turning ideas into something that creates value for the customers, the value prop, and captures value for the org, the business model. So, Karen, I am totally with where you are, is that I believe that we are a business role. Product management is a business role. And maybe the hardest, to get this back to that original question, the hardest activity to do consistently is for product managers to actually play that business role, because we keep getting pulled into the technical side. We keep getting pulled into every other job. Eva, I'm going to ask you this question. Since you've been a product manager, how often were you pulled into tech support to do tech support things?
If I had $1, I'd be a rich woman that could basically
Move to
buy my
wherever you wanna
dream
go.
home. Buy that dream home that I can't get right now. But yeah, it's insane. But especially for me, I work for a component of the organization that was just brought in last year. We were just added in. And I feel like we're like the stepchildren of the product. So the product support team, they want to do all the core components. They don't want to do the new stepchildren components when companies are bought out or brought in, because they're not experts. They just kind of go to the PMs and be like, well, you know this better than us. We're too busy. So yeah.
And it's interesting. Cory had put there, so the hardest thing is the actual job of product management. And I'm going to, no,
not the job, being able to do the job.
Okay.
Being allowed to do the job. That's all I
being
want.
allowed.
I want to do the job. I can't do that because I got to do all this other crap.
And I was gonna, and I'll get to you in a second, Mary. I was gonna to sort of take on what Eva was saying. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and I was hosting a table on how to build a successful product management organization. And we had a CEO, executive board member of a $1 billion company who chose to sit at the product table. She wanted to. And a director of product management at a publishing company said, how do I get my sales team to sell my stepchild products, right? I am not the fancy big 80% of revenue product. I am the other products, and I can't get my salespeople to sell it. And so I'm going to say, and the answer was change your comp plan. But I think the hardest thing is to be the product manager for the stepchild product because nobody pays attention to it. May, I had to get my story in. Sorry, May.
It's okay. So my organization recently reworked how we did. We brought in like very experienced agile coaches, leaders in engineering, and like we're reworking the way we build everything, the way we do everything. So everything's like, let's try this empowered teams thing, maybe it'll work, but it takes time to get there, right? So lately we've gone to the point where the product managers, most of whom came from consultancy, so they're used to kind of mostly being quite constrained and like working with Eng a lot, into a role that's more like, let's talk about impact, let's talk about what it is that we do. And it's like quite a change for most PMs when you find yourself in that transition state where you actually have time to do product management. So like we can define what product management means. So actually this past week we got together in person and we just talked about what it means to be a product manager. And one of the really interesting conversations that came up is that our role is to inspire, right? We talk about the why, we talk about what is the most important problem we can solve and the why associated with that. And we inspire the team to agree that, yes, this is the right thing and let's build it. And like, let's have that excitement to like come up with solutions, right? So if you do have time to do the product management work, I think that's a really hard thing to do because then you become a salesperson. I feel like there's a lot of
I want to
ifs,
jump
like,
in
there's
here
a-
because
yeah.
because I think there's a part of what we're talking about which has to do with visibility. Okay, so if what other people see or see of me as a product manager is working with engineers, that's what they're going to assume the value is, right? And the real value, and I'm sure if I went around and asked for a show of hands, you'd all agree, which is it's the quiet time when you're actually thinking about what the next most important thing to do is, right? Like that's where you add your value, but people can't see it, right?
So wait, that goes back to focus then.
It goes, I think it goes to orchestration. Okay. In other words, you're creating a symphony, right? And at times you got all the violins who are up front getting all the glory, engineers, right? And at times it's the little guy with the triangle at the back who does the accent, right? Like all of it needs to be in place. And your perspective is kind of looking at over the playing field and saying, is everything right? And if it isn't, and I think that's the important thing for other people to understand is we may step in like Eva does and do support. Why? Because she doesn't have that. So she's got to step in, right? But it leads to a very distorted view of what we do.
I like the idea that people see the value through the lens we do it. And we did a topic of the week on the value of product management. There was a whole bunch of design and engineering thought leaders, agile people saying, why do we even need product management, right? And I think that the more we get sucked into being servants to them, and so maybe that servant, we have to do it in a servant leader way, not in we're a servant to, so maybe that word is an issue.
And that's why one of the reasons why product owner is so problematic is it's product management as defined by developers. I mean, the creators of Scrum created that role. And if you go to sales and say, what do you expect from product management? They go, I need you to help me close deals. Bring the roadmap, make it editable so that we can change it in the car. If you go to marketing, they say, well, you're where all the words come from, right? So we're subject matter expert for so many people. And if they define the job, then they'll define the job through that lens.
Yeah, I like that. And maybe it does come down to, Eva had put in there that maybe it's product Jedi we need to. These are not the user stories you're looking for. Right? And we need to go forward with that. Gosh, this conversation is great. I want to get to at least our poll. The poll was, what is the hardest product management activity? Not just to do consistently, what is the hardest one? And I pulled from the answers from Monday that we thought were hard to do consistently. Roadmaps, 0%. Positioning and messaging, 0%. It depends, 0%, which is normally doesn't happen. And it came down to that focus and trust conversation we had earlier. 70% went with building trust. 30%. I went with Calvin and Jason on staying focused, and I chose to do so to be provocative because everybody else was on trust. Steve, did you vote in this?
I did, and I voted for the popular answer, building trust.
Okay. Pamela, you voted for building trust. Cory, you changed. I put focus in there for you and you changed. Talk to me.
So two things happened. Well, a few things happened the last 2 days. One, I started working with somebody and that person was eventually let go because they didn't trust them. They didn't trust them to do the work. They didn't trust them to perform the actions, and that was proven out. So it was sad to see, but because they didn't trust them, that's the reason that they were let go. The other thing was, as I'm talking to the CEO who I'm working with, he was talking about hiring a product person, a product leader to do that. And the words that I used were, you have to trust the person that you're handing this off to implement your vision of what your company and the problem that you're solving. If you don't trust that person to do that, then you're going to not do it, right? You're not going to trust them. You're going to keep doing the job. You're going to keep micromanaging. You're going to keep interrupting. And because you need to build that trust, or I need to build that trust with you, if that's going to be me, then let's start there.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe this is and Karen, I'm going to get to you in a second. Maybe this is sort of like strategy and execution, right? Which is more important, strategy or execution? Both, right? Which is more important, strategy and culture? Both, right? So when I looked at focus, I looked at it and saying, we could have all the trust in the world. We could do our, outward bound trust falls and build trust and do all this type of stuff. And yes, I know that's just performative. It's not actually how you really build trust in the organization. But if we don't have a focused strategy, right, that we have consensus around to bring Calvin in from the first round, what does all that trust get us, right? If we don't have a focused strategy to execute on. So that was sort of the provocative stuff, me trying to be provocative just because the vote was already gone by the time I voted. And I no longer care about winning every poll. I care about being provocative. Karen, your thought?
So I did not have a chance to vote in the poll, but again, I just am coming off of this massive project where I interviewed all these people in the organization. And the number one thing that floated up is we need to understand what our strategy is, like OKRs or something. And there can only be a few of them. Like somebody told me about a book, The One Thing. I haven't read it. I don't own it yet. But they said what happens is we need to stay focused as an organization. We don't know what to stay focused on. And if there are too many things to focus on at the top level, once that filters into the organization, it gets really complicated quickly. So they want leadership to pick a few things so that they can really go back to what those things are. And then part two of that is around trust, which entails letting go. So if I'm a leader or a manager, I have to have this trust back and forth with my team, which means I'm going to have to at some point let go of whatever it is that I'm hanging on to and let them perform. So it's like the third cycle.
It's like yin and yang almost. They're and many times on this call, I've said, the ultimate goal is Cory talked about the frame or the playing field or the guide rails. We build a strategy policy that actually provides that focus and helps and enables people to make those decisions. But if we do that, then we have to trust them to make those decisions, and sort of the two things come together. And that's where transparency and, back to Clay's point, transparency and them being able to tell us what we need to know so we can make our decisions. But our goal should be to push decisions as far downstream to the edge as possible and enable that. And that's where we've used the agile word capital A as in, but agility, right? That's where you get agility.
Yeah. And if you look at product management, one of the things that people are saying is let the developers participate in building the solution to the problem, because we'll have these situations where product management comes in and says, I want you to build this and this and this and this. And it's like building a sandwich at Subway. I want this on my sandwich. Our engineers aren't sandwich builders. They're creative thinkers. And we have to allow that to happen.
The problem stories lesson in our fundamentals of managing products course is perhaps my favorite lesson. I love teaching it, but it's the place where you get the most oh shit, right? People are like, when you get people to start realizing that they're solutioning and they're not really writing problem stories at the epic level, that is one of the biggest, most tangible. I tell the story. I had a client sign up for a workshop, four 90-minute work sessions to help them do this. And we got through the first 45 minutes of them pushing back. And then finally one of them got it. And then it was like the light went on and they're like, oh, wow. And we only got through 2 of the 4. Don't tell them, right? But that's a place where if you can shift it that much and get it to do that, it makes a ton of difference.
And I think this is the whole factory mindset that seems to have permeated so many of our businesses is, the executives or the salespeople or the product managers come in and say, please make me this sandwich. I want these parts. And Karen's totally right. Who wants to do that work? A developer is a creative role, and product management's comparatively not. I expect the product manager to be in charge of understanding friction.
It's an
understanding
role.
Problems, right? And yet here's my point. I get into these arguments on LinkedIn all the time. I mean, product manager experts, self-proclaimed, say, oh, no. Product managers have to tell development exactly what to build. And I'm like, no, that's a design role. The product manager is on the problem side and the development team is on the solution side. And they're like, oh, Steve, I totally disagree. The product manager should be designing solutions. And I got in trouble, and I'll make this real quick. I was on this worthless Facebook board filled with a whole bunch of product managers, newbies. And somebody said, what's your favorite prototyping tool? And somebody said Figma, and somebody else said PowerPoint, somebody else said pen and paper. And I said, my favorite prototyping tool is a qualified designer. And that was not well received by the newbies. And I think, honestly, I think that one of the things that may be making product management an attractive thing for newbies is they think it's a design role. They say things like, I'm really excited about designing solutions. And I'm like, great, you should get a job in development.
But that actually is, it's not them. They're hearing it from Teresa Torres says product management is a design role, right? She views product managers as designers. And, our friend Debbie Levitt, who we've been getting she's been giving her thoughts, some of the Monday questions. We have this ongoing conversation about how do you find it? And to me, this goes back to the conversation of the business role of product management, right? And is it Andy Budd? Is that the design thought leader out in the UK? I think his name's Andy Budd, but he and I were having a conversation on Twitter about this. And it's like, one of the values of product management is designers are really focused on that customer value equation, the user value equation, and really understanding driving that. Sometimes it's not viable for the business, and the product manager needs to be the person who makes the tough decision about, we're doing things that are both viable for the customer value wise and for the business value wise, not just one. And product management can be that hard guy. I completely agree. Clay put, it's more about curiosity than creativity. Product management is more about analysis and decisions than it is about creativity. And so maybe this is a way we need to be looking at it.
I also want to channel Clay's other comment. My company doesn't have any designers, so I'm filling that role. Yes, that's what we find is we have a firm that doesn't understand the value of design. And so they say, hey, product manager, in all your spare time, I need you to design solutions because you suck at it less than developers do.
And this goes to our conversation we had yesterday in one of our coaching sessions, Steve, where I went out there and I said it. I said, perhaps we should be investing in designers instead of product owners, right? Maybe if you're so focused on it, if you can only afford a product owner or a product designer, maybe you should be affording a product designer, right? And the role they can play there. But boy, this conversation has been going,
off the rails since about 1 minute after it began.
No, it's been on the rails, but maybe I had the rails way too wide. My playing field, my frame was too big in Cory construct. So, we've got a little time. I don't know if I can hit all of us because we do have a large panel today. As a product leader, how can you help your team get better at these hard activities? We've been talking about all these hard things.
Well, first you need their trust, right? I'm serious. Because I explained what happened at my company. I need them to trust me enough to tell me, oh yeah. Luckily, they didn't realize that doing all their bugs, all their tasks in chat was like a really bad thing. So they were like, oh yeah, we do it in chat. But there are things that they probably know that they're not good at, that I want them to have the trust in me to say, I'm really bad at debugging or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I taught that. If you want, I can help you with that. But they gotta ask for it.
So you have to help them build that trust. May, you've been raising your hand nice and patiently.
I have a story. So we have a brand new product manager, and like a couple weeks in, and her pod of devs and a brand new designer as well have always just like, they have 100 open items in their sprint right now. So like just to tell you, it's not working very well. So she's like, okay, we've got this one fairly simple problem. So she wrote it out, followed the standard template we've set, like problem, impact, importance, and then like maybe the success criteria, outstanding questions. With the team together, they went through the questions, they like figured out it, and she said, do you feel pretty confident that we can build a solution around it? And everyone said yes. She's like, okay, great. So me and the subject matter expert, we're gonna leave the room and you guys come up with the solution and then you pitch it back to us. And they're like, wait, you're doing what now? Yeah, she's like, yeah, no, you take your time, tell us how long you're gonna need, but come back and pitch it back to us. And it's something they've never had to do before. So she checked in with one of the technical leads, the data lead, and she said, so how did that go? And he's like, that's terrifying, but also really exciting at the same time, right? And like, she doesn't have trust. She hasn't established it, maybe a little bit, but the culture of the team is enough that they're willing to try something, right? So it depends on the group of people you have. You need the right group of people to do this kind of work. If you have devs who are very used to like, hand me the thing and I build it and you give it back and I don't want to think about it anymore, like that's not going to work, right? So, but if you have the right kind of people, it might be worth trying.
I love it. And Pamela, I just love what you said right there. She gave trust. They wanted to be trustworthy.
Yeah, if you assume positive intent from somebody else, like I'm sure that you as the service or support person are going to help me with this. You'd be amazed how people kind of like, they don't want to let you down, right? So you have to phrase it. And that's what she did. So I think that's awesome.
Brilliant story.
The subject matter expert said, wait, you want me to leave too? But I can't. And she's like, no, you're coming with me.
Brilliant.
Beautiful.
and she also showed a lot of control. Like she decided, right? And she didn't let other people work it through. And she had a vision of how she wanted it to work. Now, if it hadn't worked, she could have taken one step back, right?
Yeah. She's like, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
But I love what you said. What was it she said? It's terrifying but good, right? Was that the two?
Well, excitement and fear are actually experienced the same physically. It's the context that's different.
But I've been in that situation where it's like all of a sudden a whole new world is in front of you, which can be terrifying, but you're coming at it from a different approach or different lens. And so this trust, this transparency, I mean, we're hearing the same things come over and over again. I have to get to Cory. Yes, there should be and we don't teach soft skills here, so I'm not going to put it in our stuff, but dealing with assholes needs to be in the product management career training. It does.
That was a response to Eva's little story, but I think the way to get better at these hard activities is get your reps in. Do the thing. and do it repeatedly and don't stop doing it and keep getting
And
better
do
at
it with
doing it.
friends.
Yeah, well, it helps to find a level to do it at that you can still succeed at right now that is just a little bit above you. Because doing your reps with a 1,000-pound Arnold Schwarzenegger is
Right.
He's just,
So
you're
I
just
can't-
pushing on the bar.
Right. I
Yeah.
can't go upstairs and squat 500 pounds, but I can go upstairs and squat, 215 or whatever. I could do that. I could do that today. I can't do it. How many times can I do it? I can do it 8 times a day. Maybe next week I could do it 9 times because I'm getting my reps and I'm getting stronger at doing that. The same problem exists here, which is the less you do the thing, the more pressure is on the one time you try to do it, and you're going to fail. You're going to get crushed by the bar. Don't do that.
All right. Well, we're quickly getting to the end, and so it's time for the lightning round, and we're going to need to be lightning because we've got a large panel and we've only got a few minutes left. So the question is, what is the impact of more consistency across a product management organization? If we can get more consistency in all these things that we go with, what's the impact of that? Now I'm going to start with Calvin.
I think things get done faster.
All right. Velocity. Is velocity the right word?
Velocity is the right word.
Okay. Velocity. Cory.
Expectations.
Expectations. Higher expectations or just having expectations?
Consistent expectations.
Consistent expectations. I like that. Karen.
Continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement. That's a good one. Clay.
I think actually motivation. I think that consistency lets people stay, excited.
Motivation.
There's
I like
inertia.
it.
Inertia can be not moving or moving.
But I view motivation as positive inertia almost. I
Yeah.
like that. Eva.
Possibly less technical debt, less defects, things like that.
So let's get rid of some of the bad stuff, right? We're by getting more consistency, we can remove or prevent it even from happening, some of that technical debt, some of the bad stuff. I love that. May.
People are going to speak up more and you're actually going to get more change, which is counterintuitive. But yes, like
It might feel more
Karen said.
safe.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Pamela.
I was going to say trustworthy teams, as opposed to you being a trusted person within the team. If you actually build this, then you get trustworthy.
I like that. Steve.
Well, I was going to say trust for all teams. Let me say it in a different way. Respect for all teams.
Trust and respect. This has been potentially one of the best yes ands we've ever done. And Karen, yes, I'll get you the list. What I'm going to say is the impact of more consistency because product management organization is sustainable product growth, right? All of these things we've talked about enable us to make sure we're working on the right things. We're enabling the organization to deliver right and it great sustainable product growth, which means it's profitable and we can grow our profits. And so, wow, what a great conversation. I mean, we went all over the place with this. It started with sort of hardest activity to do consistent, but we got into sort of some even Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the dysfunctions of teams and trust and consensus and creativity versus curiosity, and an amazing conversation. I know I say that every week. Wow, again, I'm still, my mind is processing. What a great panel. Calvin, Cory, Karen, Clay, Eva, Pamela, May, my partner, Steve. We do this every week. Monday, I put a question in the community. Normally Wednesdays, Thursdays. This week, I put the poll out there. And on Fridays, we have these amazing conversations. That's it. You guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week in the community. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.